our e-seminar today on reporting in SleepWorks software version 6.x. By 6.x, we are referring to software version 6.0, 6.1, and 6.3. By the same token, the things that I'll be talking about today also apply to software version 7 as well. So there really isn't much of a difference in terms of how the reporting mechanism works between version 6 and version 7. So for all intents and purposes, it'll be useful to those of you that have both versions. My name is Franco Avolio, and I am the Sleep and Neurology Education Manager with Natus. I'll be your host and the presenter today. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them in the chat box located on the right side of your window. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to inform you that the Natus website includes a section called Neurology Seminars. So if you go to natus.com, specifically, just going to grab my pointer here, specifically to the Education and Support section, there was a new option added. It says Neurology Seminars. This wasn't there before, but it is now. And this section is designed to store all of the information with respect to the e-seminars that we will be holding with respect to sleep and EEG, EMG, and IOM. Now, right now, the calendar is full for the year 2011 right up to December, and it includes at this point primarily e-seminars on sleep and EEG. However, I know for a fact that there will be more added, and so I would encourage you to check back, not every day, but I'd probably say if you check back maybe at least once a month, you will probably see some additions. When you click on the Neurology Seminars link, that will take you to the Neurology Seminar Series. There's a brief description, and then there's a link over here. If you click on that, you'll be able to download the one-page double-sided copy of the e-seminar calendar. This is double-sided. If you flip this over, it will show the e-seminar scheduled for July right through to December. Okay, with that aside, I'm going to begin our presentation today. I'd like to provide you, first of all, with an outline of the reports that I want to talk about. So I grouped them into 4 report types. We'll be talking about individual study reports, and these are the reports that most of you are probably familiar with and that you are working with these types of reports probably on a daily basis. We'll be spending some time, most of our time, talking about these reports and the factors that affect the values in these reports. We'll also talk a little bit about the comparison scoring reports. These are the reports that you may produce if your lab is accredited, for example, and you have to provide a report where you're comparing a gold standard or one person scoring results with that of another. There's a distribution of diagnosis report, and there are some database reports that I'll also just talk briefly about. I'd like to start off by just defining the reports. The reports that are generated by SleepWorks, they're basically a Microsoft Word document containing data which tabulates and summarizes study data recorded by sensors, such as an oximetry reading or an oximetry trend, and data such as staging or event markings which have been manually marked, reviewed, and approved by a scorer. Individual study reports are affected by by primarily 4 factors. The 4 factors, and what I want to do is we're going to talk about individual study reports first, and then we're going to talk about each of the 4 factors. So the first one is user input. This may sound a little obvious, but basically this depends on whatever type of event or labeling that the end user decides to input into the report. So obviously that will affect the report. The report design is the second factor, and by that I mean specifically the report fields that make up the report, the syntax, whatever type of structure or format that are part of your report design. The third factor is the scoring set, and the scoring set, and some of you may know this term as you may call this a scoring map, which is basically an individual's opinion or individual's record of their scoring results for a particular study. When you generate a report, reports are based on a scoring set. Now you can have multiple scores, you can have multiple scoring sets. So it's important when you generate a report that you know which scoring set the report is based on before you generate the report. And the fourth factor are the sleep settings, which are available in the software, and we'll be talking about that towards the end. All right, so now let's drill down into these factors. I'm going to just provide a brief overview of how we generate reports, and for this I'm going to share my desktop. What I wanted to do is basically attempt to mimic a sample workflow that those of you who are scoring studies may be doing. You'll have a study open, you'll score your study, so I'm just going to add a few tags. All right. Add a few tags. Call that Structure. You'll go through the study, you have your study open, you'll score it, you'll make some comments, you'll stage it. When you're done, some of you may actually just access the study info button, which is right here. You can go up into your comment section, and you may decide to make some remarks about your study. You may decide to comment. You click OK. You may close the study. Save your changes, yes. Takes us back to the database window. This is the study that we're looking at. All right, Breathe Kent. So if we select the study, and by select I mean left-clicking on it, we select the report button. We choose what type of a report we want to generate. It asks us if we want to give this a new name or if we want to overwrite the old name. If it's asking us to overwrite, it means there's one that was already generated. Now, for the purposes of today's discussion, I've intentionally selected the very short studies, and I've got a very short version of a report just to speed things up. So this is just a one-page report. So here's our report. It outputs it into Microsoft Word. We don't have to, when the study is open, it is automatically given a file name. It is automatically saved in the patient directory. When we're done, we don't have to go and do file or save as or anything. It's all done automatically and kept within the study directory of the patient. I can close this, and when we go back to the database window, if I wanted to retrieve this report, I can just right-click on it, and I can go to Edit Report. And it will display all the reports that have been generated for this particular patient. In addition to generating reports, you can also attach documents. And so if I right-click, and let's say I click Attach Reports, and let's say I have this patient fill out an Epworth survey, and I want to test the results of their Epworth survey. So I browse to it, locate it, I click Open. I can give it a name. Let's just call this EP Survey. Tells me that it is attached. And I'm going to attach another report. This time, I want to attach a copy of the patient's medical chart. We've scanned it. And now I want to make it part of this record. So I'm going to click Browse to it, select it, click Open, and I'm just going to say Med Chart. Okay. And again, to retrieve it, all we have to do is right-click on the study record and go to Edit Report, and we can see that these files have been attached. If I click on Med Chart and I click OK, it will open up the actual document, whatever it is. If you want to attach a patient photo, it's a JPEG file, you can do that as well. Or is that a photo? If you want to delete any of the reports, you can right-click and just go to Delete Report, and you can select whichever report you'd like to delete, and it will remove that. All reports, if I go into the info box here, it identifies the study directory, specifically where on the hard drive all of these report files are located. If you go into the patient info box, at the bottom it says study directory, and it describes or displays the path where all study report files are stored. If we were to actually navigate to the study directory, this is what it would look like. So you have all of your these are the sleep files. All right, you really don't need to be going into here, but I just wanted to show you that the med chart and all the report documents, they're all kept in one central location, so that when it comes time to archiving, for example, archiving will store and capture all of the report documents or all of the documents that make up that patient record and allow you to archive that to disk. A nice option when you are purging studies, that is, if I click on the purge button here, some people I know will archive the entire study, including the reports, and then you'll have your report stored on a CD. And then later on, if you ever need to retrieve the report, you end up having to grab the CD just to get the report. Well, there is an option when you purge to purge the study files, including the video, so just the files that take up a lot of space, but you can leave the reports. And this is a nice option because the report files are generally small, and if you're retrieving CDs or disks just to get the report, this is a nice option. Now, that is just one sample workflow. I want to demonstrate another workflow. I'm going to open up the study again. And I know that some people, when they're scoring, they'll look at their study, they'll make their annotations, and before they actually close the study, they actually want to generate the report because you want to see what the report looks like. Because maybe some of the comments that you want to enter, for example, in here, maybe some of these comments will be based on the results of the report. So if you're doing that, all right, I'm just going to delete these comments right now. So if you're the type of person where you're scoring your study and you want to you're making some annotations, I'll just score. All right, you're adding notes and whatnot, and then you want to generate your report. Go to File, Save. The study's still open. Go to the database window. Generate your report. I'm just going to click Yes to overwrite. All right, so here's our report. If I go back in here, let's say patient age. All right, I'm going to click OK. Now I'm going to go back to the database. I'm going to generate a report again. I'm going to overwrite the last one. So notice those comments that I just typed in. All right? They did not carry over. All right? And the reason is there is some data in the reports or in your study, information that is generally stored in your patient info screen, including all these demographic information and comments. These comments actually get stored a little bit differently compared to all of the calculations, such as your AHI, your indices, and number of events. So if you want to generate your report before you close the study, just keep in mind that if you put any comments in here, that they will not carry over to the final report unless you actually close the study. Now, if you make changes in the actual study in terms of when we're talking about you're changing staging labels, you're changing stages, or you're adding events or removing events, and you go and generate a report, that will get updated when you generate the report. Study open. However, if you add comments to the study information bar, these comments will not carry over in real time. In order for these to carry over in real time, you will need to click OK and close the actual study. When you do this, these comments then make their way back to the database where that information is stored, and the way the reporting mechanism works it will actually look at the database to retrieve some information. So if I click on Report Now, and I click OK, we should see the new comments making their way back. And there it is. All right, now I want to look at how SleepWorks creates a new report. So I want to provide you with just a very brief understanding of how Microsoft Word creates a new report, or rather a new document. When you start Microsoft Word, a report or a document, which happens to be blank, by default is displayed. So this document that we see here right now, it has characteristics or attributes that can be changed. For example, there is the default font here of Arial. The font size is 11. The fact that the margins are set to 1 inch or whatever that is. So all of these attributes get stored in a template file. The name of the template file, we go to File to Properties, and we go to Summary. The template file is normal dot dot. All right, so this dot dot extension is a standard that's utilized by Microsoft programs to identify template files, or files which store information on how new files or documents are to be created. So every time you open a Word document, all the documents are based off of the template. So let's say you wanted to change this template. Every time you open up Microsoft Word, it's always blank. But if you wanted to change this template so that every time you opened it, let's say you wanted your document to display the date at the top of your document in bold italics, what we would have to do is close the document and open up the template file. So we would browse and locate the normal dot dot file. All right, now we've got the template file opened. And let's say I want to insert a date field. So I'm going to go into Word, because Word has fields. So I go into Insert, and I go to Field, and I look for the date field. And I want it to appear in this format. I click OK, and I'm going to underline it. It's already bolded and italicized. I'm going to save it, save the template, and I'm going to close it. Now, I'm going to go into Word. I'm going to click on New Blank Document. Or let's pretend we're creating a new report. So every time I click the New Blank Document now, it displays the date in bold and italicized automatically, because we've customized the template that is used to create new documents. So SleepWorks employs the same methodology when it comes to designing a report. Reports are treated like Word's normal dot dot file in that it is a template. However, rather than creating a Sleep report directly through Word, we don't do that. We actually do it through the database window. So I'm going to close this and go into Tools, Options, Report Templates, and I'm going to click on New. I'm going to give this a name, call this Summary Report. OK. Now, if you recall, in the normal dot dot file, we wanted to insert fields. Well, it works the same way. However, the field list that we're looking for doesn't come from this Insert menu. There's another toolbar here that's called Excel Text Fields. So if you click on this, it opens up a separate window. Now, this window, this toolbar, is only available in Microsoft Word when you open or access Microsoft Word through this particular route by clicking on the New or the Edit button. If you try to double-click and open a dot file through Explorer, it will not work. So I'm going to just quickly create a quick report and just call this Summary Report. Bold. I want to insert, let's say we have a logo. Let's say the water lilies are our logo. Resize that. Okay. Put that on the left side. And I'm just going to type in a few headers here, patient name, and I'm going to put age. Down here I'm going to create a little table. So right now I'm just utilizing Microsoft Word's tools. I will put, let's say, 2 columns, and I'll put 5 rows. And here I'm going to type apneas and hypopneas, apnea and hypopnea count, and time in bed. And then down here, let's start filling in the fields that are supposed to go in here. So just like we did before when we wanted to insert the date, we went into Insert, we went to Field. So here, our field list is accessed by going to the Excel text field. All of the fields of information are categorized by subject area. We've done our best to do that, and sometimes you might find a field that may appear to be out of place, but just have a look. The apnea-hypopnea count, I'm just going to move this over to the right. I want that value to appear here, so I'm going to go to the respiratory section, and I'm going to look under respiratory, number of apneas and hypopneas. So I placed my cursor where I want it to appear, and I left-click on the actual field. All right, so there's the field, number of arousals. I'm going to go up here, look for number of arousals, left-click on it, it's there. I'm going to put my mouse pointer where I want total sleep time to appear. So I'm going to go into sleep statistics, and there is total sleep time. And I want to add time in bed. So these are individual. When you see this particular icon, they represent individual single value fields. You also have the option to add pre-formatted or pre-designed tables by going to the Tables section, and if you want, you can pick one of these tables that are already designed. So table of stage distribution, for example, which is basically a breakdown of the amount of time spent in each sleep stage. I don't care to see the epoch column, so I'm just going to right-click and delete that column. I don't care to see the percentage of sleep period time, so I'm just going to right-click and delete that column. And I might just spread this out a little bit. Okay, so you have the choice. You can use individual fields. You can use tables that have already been pre-formatted. You can insert graphs. The graphs, or plots, you'll find them under the plots category. So there's a pie chart, for example. I'm just going to format this and make it a little bit smaller. I'm going to delete that header, make this a little bit smaller that way, and I also want to include another plot showing the stage hypnogram. All right? Same thing. Just going to format this. And we'll do that. And I want to put another section here that says comments. So these are maybe the physician comments or the scorer's comments. And the comments I can find up here in custom fields under sleep comments or physician report and sleep comments, and I click on report. All right, so we've just created a template. I'm going to close it. All right, it shows up under user report templates. If it's user report templates, it means it's stored on this machine only. If it's stored under common, that means if your computers are configured properly or appropriately, that the report will make its way to all the other machines. I'm going to select the setting and go to report and select generate a summary report. And here's our report. We got our values. There are comments. I actually forgot to put the tags up here for patient name and age. Okay. I want to just quickly introduce or provide you with a brief introduction to one more aspect in the report mechanism here. All right, so I want to go back to this report, and I want to edit this report, so I'm going to click on Edit. All right, I'm just going to add the patient information that we didn't do. I will put first name, space, last name, age. All right, so up here, let's say I wanted to add another row beneath there that says number of the AHI in REM. All right, so let's go and look for our AHI, which is our apnea-hypopnea index. We go to our respiratory section. I go to the apnea-hypopnea index. All right, now because I want to apply a condition such as REM, I want to utilize a unique type of tag here that's called a report section tag. Report section tags allow you to use any of the tags in any of the other categories. However, it allows you to apply a condition to them. So for example, here I want to know the apnea-hypopnea index, but only when the patient was in REM sleep. So to do that, I need to preface this field or this tag with a sleep stage limiter or filter or condition called REM. So I'm going to preface it with REM. I'm going to click on, or left click on the REM. Now when you apply a report section tag, the way they work, I applied it just before the apnea-hypopnea index. That means it's going to continue applying this condition from left to right, all the way down, unless I insert another tag that says, look, apply this condition, calculate the apnea-hypopnea index, but once you're done, I want you to look at all the stages again. So I'm going to click on all stages. All right? So same thing, if you wanted to create a REM supine apnea-hypopnea index, so now you want to apply two limiters, and we can preface it. We can say REM and add a body position limiter called, or condition called supine. It doesn't matter if REM or supine comes first. And remember, the supine condition will continue to be applied. If I left this right now, the REM condition would be applied to the apnea-hypopnea index, and then it would stop. And the report would continue to tabulate the number of arousals, total sleep time in bed on all stages. However, the supine condition would be applied to everything down. So I need to remember to tell the report to look at all body positions after you've calculated the apnea-hypopnea index. These report section tags are, I'd probably say it's one of the number one, it's a pretty popular reason why some report values don't add up when people call in with questions saying something's not adding correctly. And many times someone has forgotten to close or end the condition of a report section tag. Okay, so those are report section tags. There are some additional tables that work a little differently, but again, I'm not going to go in depth about that in this particular session. There is a report manual that describes all of these things in a lot more detail, and that's available from the website, and I'll point to that where you can download that a little bit later. Okay, so for now I just wanted you to get a basic understanding of how you can create and edit your own template, and we are going to move on to the next topic. Now I want to talk about the scoring sets. So when you have a study, let's open up our sample study again. Okay, so in our study, we have the option to have multiple scores. I'm just going to expand this a little bit. I can right-click down in here and go to Settings and go to Scoring Sets. I can also access this menu by going to Edit, Settings, Scoring Set. So right now, this particular study shows that there are two scoring sets. There is always a default staging set, which is one that we always create. So if you do not create a staging set or scoring set, we use the terms interchangeably, then there's always one there for you, a default staging set. So if you don't create anything, everything automatically gets saved to the default staging set. If you want to separate your scoring, so for example, if you have a technician and her name is Helen, so Helen comes in and she wants to keep her scoring separate from the default staging set, then in order to start to make hers the active scoring set, in other words, you want to, all the results that you're about to, all of the notations that you're about to make, you want that to be saved in Helen's folder or Helen's scoring set. We need to make it active. So we select Helen and we say set it active. Alright, so now it's the active scoring set. Clicking OK. You see in our trend summary that Helen's hypnogram is now at the bottom. You may have noticed that the active scoring set is highlighted in blue. Alright, so these are Helen's results, and when you switch scoring sets, even these event markers here switch over to whatever Helen had marked. So when you generate a report, if I were to close this study right now and generate the report, it would be based on Helen's scoring set. If I were to double-click on the default staging set, this is another way to switch back to the default staging set. If I right-click, go back to settings, and let's say I add another one. Call this one Jonah. Jonah comes in and he wants to score the study. He creates a scoring set, declares his scoring set the active one, clicks OK. He has a blank slate. And so now he can jump to the beginning and he can begin to stage his study. So again, if you were to generate a report right now, it would be based on Jonah. If you were to generate a report expecting to see a number of results, and maybe the default staging set or Helen's report is complete, but you generate the report on Jonah, you'll probably get a very blank looking report. So that's why it's important to know which is the active scoring set. The only way to identify which is the active scoring set is to actually open the study. You have to have the study opened, and you have to navigate down to the scoring set section, either through your trend window, or you can go up to Edit Settings and select Scoring Sets, and you can find out which one is active by looking at it in here. When you select your scoring set, you also have the option to determine or to declare what type of labeling you want to use. If you check alternative staging refers to the N1, N2, N3, and REM labeling that came out in 2007. If you leave this unchecked, so if I click on, let's see, let me just escape out of here for a second. Alright, so you see stage 2. So if we go back in here, and I switch it to alternative staging, and I click Apply, you see how that switches to N2. Okay? If you're looking to use different terminology for pediatric or for infant studies, you click on the option Infant, click Apply, and stage 2, or the number 2 key press, corresponds to quiet sleep, incidentally, if you're using an infant scoring mask. So that's why that happens. So here, you can control what type of labeling you'd like to see. Now, even though you're controlling the labeling here, you are only controlling the labeling that you see on screen and not necessarily what's going in the report. Because remember, the report is going to be looking at the tags that you have actually used to populate your fields or your report data with. Alright, so it's important to know which scoring set is the active scoring set when you generate your report. Now, let's move on to the last factor when we're talking about individual study reports, and that is the sleep settings. All right, if we look at this menu, I want to make this a little bit easier to navigate. And so what I've done in the next screen is I've broken it up into two pieces. So the top part, all right, where the blue arrow is, this section here, this is all one section, and that section, I call that the scheme section. This is where you can specify what scheme you want to configure the rules for. The rules is everything down here. I'll come back up here and explain this or demonstrate. This will make more sense to you after I go through all the rules. So first I want to talk about each of these rules, and then I'll explain the scheme. So the rules is what's important here. So let's talk about stage assigned to disconnected time. All right, consider the following example. We're looking at a hypnogram. So let's say you have a study. At 10 p.m. you had your lights off. At 11 p.m. the head box was disconnected. All right, from 11 to 11:20. So for 20 minutes. Why? Maybe the patient went to the bathroom. Maybe you had to reapply an electrode. You had some difficulty. Whatever. Head box had to be disconnected. Then it happened again at 2 a.m. to 2:30. A half an hour. Then you've got it from 4 a.m. to 4:10 a.m. So in total, you've got 3 episodes of head box disconnect time. Now, the stage assigned to disconnected time allows you to have these disconnected times treated so that you can decide whether or not you want to include the times in your report. So let's look at this. There's 20 minutes here, there's 30 minutes there, that's 50 minutes, plus another 10 minutes, it's 60 minutes. So we're talking an entire hour. So if you wanted to treat these as wake, for example, all right, then you would check that box. So here's your before. When you generate the report, these disconnected times, if I could redraw the hypnogram, would look like this. All right? So now you've got, what did we say, 60 minutes. 60 minutes of wake time added to your time in bed. You'll want to consider that because, of course, if you add the 60 minutes to your time in bed, consider the effect on your sleep efficiency, for example. So that's one option. The next option is called carry forward. The carry forward option works like this. Basically, the last epoch, or the epoch before the disconnect, whatever the stage was, so in this case, the epoch before the disconnect was stage 2. If you select carry forward, it'll carry the stage 2 right through that break until you reconnect. All right? If there was another disconnect here and it was wake, it'll carry through, right through as wake until you reconnect. Down here it was disconnected and the patient was in stage 3. It'll carry through right until you reconnect. So that's what the carry forward option does. And the last option is just treating each of these disconnects as lights on. All right, so you won't actually see these tags getting added in the study, but in the reports, the values, particularly your time in bed, this is where you will see the impact. All right, so you can imagine if you have you've got a 10 p.m. lights off, and then at 11 p.m. there's a lights on tag. You won't actually see the lights on tag in the study on screen. However, the report will treat this time as if you put a lights on tag and a lights off tag at 11:20, thereby excluding these gaps from your time in bed calculation. So these are options that are available to you to treat these disconnect times. Okay, let's look at the next step, the report options now. So in this section here, we've got a few definitions. sleep onset, REM onset, and PLMs. Basically, here you can define what you want your sleep onset or your sleep latency to be. So here, you're defining it as the first total epoch of stage 1, 2, 3, 4, or REM. So basically, it's the first stage of first epoch of any stage of sleep. If that's how you want to, if you want to define your latency like that, then you can. If you go into the Excel Tech field list and we expand sleep statistics, there's a latency section, and if you expand it, there are a number of latency tags. The sleep latency tag and the sleep onset tags here correspond directly to the definition. Now, if you expand the Advanced tab here, you will see a number of other options with respect to latency definitions. You'll have the choice. You can actually specify whether you want latency to stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4, or REM, and you can also specify whether you want that latency to be marked from sleep onset or from lights off. So you're given a few more options. But with respect to this definition, this specifically applies to these two tags right here. So this is what I mean when it's important that your report design has the proper tag in order to give you the value that you're looking for. The next definition, same as the sleep latency. In some respects, you've got your definition here, and this definition corresponds specifically to these tags in the latency section. The next section is basically the definition for PLMs, and these affect all of the PLM tags that are found under the limbs section of your Excel Tech field list. I'm not going to go through the definition. It's pretty straightforward, I think. And again, whatever you mark here will affect the definition of these tags.
So the event with arousal rule. The event is said to have caused the arousal if the arousal starts after the start of the event, but no later than 2 seconds after the end of the event. So let's just focus on that part first. So here we've got an obstructive hypopnea. Okay, we've got an obstructive hypopnea, and let's say I want to mark an arousal right over here. Okay? Call that an arousal. Now, one of the nice features of version 7 is that it will visually associate the arousal to the event. So what that means is, let's look at this. The event is said to have caused the arousal if the arousal starts after the start of the event. Okay, so the start time of this arousal has to be within 2 seconds of the end of the event, or it has to start from somewhere from the start of the hypopnea. So I'm going to click and drag this a little closer, and you see what happens visually. All right, the colors interchange. So when you see that, when you see the blue up there and the orange down there, that tells you that visually the two events are associated. Okay, I'm just going to change my time base. All right, if I move this here, it still meets the definition. All right, the event is said to have caused the arousal if the arousal starts after the start of the event. Okay, so basically, this is the start point, and then you're looking at about 2 seconds. All right, so if I move this anywhere from the start to 2 seconds after, it's considered, the event, the obstructive hypopnea, is considered to have caused this arousal. If I move a little bit further, then you see you've lost the colors, you've lost the association. Now, unfortunately, in versions prior to 7.0, you don't have that visual, so you can rely on your sight or maybe the grid lines just to keep yourself within 2 seconds. Let's complicate this a little bit. Let's add another event. I'm just going to add a snore because there's one here. Okay, so this is our rule, the event which started closest to the arousal. I'm going to just delete that one there. So right now, this event, when you have two events, an obstructive hypopnea and snoring, because the snoring, the start time is closer to the arousal, and because you've got it set to this, it's going to attribute in the report the arousal to the snore. If I move this further back, it still starts closer to the arousal. If I move it further back, it's switched now. Now, you might say the start time of the snoring is still closer than the obstructive hypopnea. Start time, why is obstructive hypopnea getting the credit for the arousal? The reason is, if you look at the rule, the event is said to have caused the arousal if the arousal starts after the start of the event, but no later than 2 seconds after the end. So because the space, the time from here, the end of the snoring to the start of the arousal is greater than 2 seconds, it no longer meets the event with arousal association. And because the arousal is within 2 seconds of the end time of the obstructive hypopnea, the credit for the arousal will go to the obstructive hypopnea. I'm going to close this. Now we're going to change this rule. We'll go back to Tools Options, and we will change this to all qualifying events. Okay. So now, when both events, if both events meet the criteria, we're not just going to see which one started closer. In the report, you're going to have one snore with an arousal and one obstructive hypopnea with an arousal. Be careful if you select this type of an option, because if you are, because you're, in essence, you might be double counting the arousals, because your total arousals will still be 1. However, if you're manually looking at your report and you're saying, well, there's one snore arousal here and there's one obstructive hypopnea arousal there, well, that's 2 arousals altogether. Why is the total arousals showing only 1? And it's because of your setting here, because you've got it set to all of the qualifying events.
The next rule is the event filtering. And report calculations do not include events marked during epochs of stage, wake, movement, unscored, or unscorable. So that's pretty straightforward, I think. If your event, so for example, by default here, this arousal would not be included in your total arousal count, for example, in your report, because you've got this checked, all right, because we've got a wake stage. Now, there is something different, though. We've added, in version 6.1, this parameter here was added where it says, attribute the event in wake to the preceding stage of sleep. Look at the following example here. The person's asleep, they're having an apnea, and let's say 10 seconds into the next epoch, all right, so after N2 into this epoch here, the purple line is the start of the next epoch. 10 seconds in, the patient might still be asleep, but then they have an arousal because they're on the tail end of a respiratory event and they wake up. Now, because of the majority of epoch rule, this epoch would get staged or classified as wake. However, in this epoch, we saw an arousal that was a result of a respiratory event. If we left this to none, this arousal would not be included in the report. And consider the impact of that. Would you be underscoring the number of arousals? How would that impact, or even respiratory events? All right, let's look at the obstructive apnea. What if an event actually, if we decided to mark this, for example, as this is on the limb movement. So let's say we marked a limb movement here, or if it was a snore, or if you saw another respiratory event that was 10 seconds into that epoch. So consider the impact of this rule. So you have the option here where if you set this to, let's say, arousals only, then what the report will do, if you have an arousal that occurs in an epoch of wake, in the report, even though you have this checked, it'll still attribute this arousal to the preceding stage of sleep. So in other words, the arousal will be counted in the report as if it occurred in the preceding epoch, which is stage 2. Okay? You have the choice to apply this rule to arousals only, or you can say to all events. So if we did mark, let's say, a limb movement here or a snore here, and we have all events, then that would include then both arousals and limb movements or snores would all be counted in the report as if they occurred in stage 2. The last parameter, or the second last parameter, is just simply something that it's just a setting that concerns the definition in the MSL, your MSLT or MWT studies. This is a typical MSLT report. If there is no sleep latency, the patient does not fall asleep, what do you want the latency to display? You can say, make it equal to the maturation, you can specify the number, or you can just say not applicable. Pretty straightforward. The last one, minimum oxygen saturation associated with the longest event. For each event type, so for central apnea, obstructive, mixed, obstructive hypopneas, limb movements, all of them, for each event type, you can identify, you can have the software go through the study, look for the longest event, and for that, once it finds that longest event, it will look from the start of the event. So let's look at the example here. You have an obstructive apnea. All right, there's the start of the event. This is the end of the event. So it's going to look from the blue line here, so from the start to 20 seconds, all right, there's the 20 seconds, after the end of this event, which takes us to this blue line. So basically from here to here, and it's going to look at the oximetry, and it's going to identify the lowest point. So if the lowest value was 82%, if you pick the proper tag that corresponds to that from the sleep template, from the Excel tech field list, the min OSAT with the max duration of the apnea, then it will produce the value, the oximetry value. In this case, let's say it was 82%. And this is available for every event type. I want to reiterate now and just go back briefly to when I talked about schemes. The reason why I grouped this in the first place, because I think that it has confused some people. So, all of these rules in the red window only apply when the scheme, when the scoring set that you've selected is set to adult and alternative staging is not checked. All right? If you check infant and you check alternative staging, you can change all of these rules in here so that it only applies to when you select in the scoring set there that you want to use infant and alternative staging. If you go back to the database window, you'll see. All right, so here are the rules here. I can change this for adult alternative staging, but as soon as I uncheck this, see how the rules change. All right, so each time I click on this, just have a look in this window. You should see some of the parameters are changing. Okay? So in total, there are 6 schemes, right? 1, 2, 3. And then if you uncheck this, you've got adult traditional scoring, let's say. Pediatric traditional scoring, infant traditional scoring. So these schemes basically store all of the rules for that particular scheme. It needs to correspond to the scoring set scheme that you've selected here. All right, these scoring set schemes by the way, are on the local machine only. So if I select alternative staging adult, this scheme will be applied to this computer only. It does not carry across the network. So you need to make sure that every machine has the proper scheme selected and, of course, the proper scoring set. We're going to talk about our comparison report. In the same window, Edit, Settings, Scoring Sets. So we have two scoring sets here. Let's say the lab, you've got a chief scoring technician, and they use the default staging set. Helen comes in, she scores her study, and she saves it in her scoring set. I now want to generate a report that compares the two. So I hold the control button down on my keyboard and left-click on the two scoring sets that I want to compare. You can only compare two scoring sets at a time. I select the two, and I click on Compare. All right, I can choose to compare all the epics that were scored in both scoring sets. I can choose a range. I can specify whether or not to include such and such tables. This is the only amount of customization that you can do for the comparison scoring report. It is not like the individual study reports. There's an option down here that says to show table descriptions. You can check that if you like. There is a parameter here that says consider events matching when closer than 5 seconds. Okay, so if, let's say I mark an arousal here, and let's just say that Helen marked an arousal here. Okay, so you got two arousals. As long as the start times of both arousals, all right, occur within, in this particular case, it's set to 5 seconds, but you can change that. So go back, compare. As long as the start times of the events occur within 5 seconds, when the report generates, it'll consider that a match. If you want to tighten it, you can just lower the number. If you want to increase it, just increase the number there. When you're done, you click OK. The report generates, and you will get something that looks like this. All right, so you've got sample scoring report. It's comparing the events, for example. There is a separate document available that describes the comparison scoring report. If you're interested in that, you can contact the tech support line, or you can also email me directly. And there is a separate document that describes this in detail. But if I'm looking at this table right now, so everything that's in red on the diagonal, these are areas where the default staging set and John staging set were in agreement. Make this a little bigger. Okay. So, if I were to look at this, of all the arousals marked by the John staging set, okay, 10 were not marked by the default staging set. 113 were marked identically between both staging sets. And 23 were marked as rara by the default staging set. All right, so in other words, with respect to the last figure, both scoring sets identified the exact same instances where events occurred. However, they simply differed in how they marked the event. All right, the limb movement. Of all the limb movements marked by the John staging set, 20 were not marked by the default staging set. 200, this number here, 200 were marked identically between both staging sets. 2 were marked as snoring events by the default staging set. Okay, and like I said, there is a document that goes through each of these tables and explains them in a little more detail in terms of interpreting them. You can have a stage by epic comparison as well, where it will look at each epic, it will show your score and compare it to the person's score. Whatever is highlighted in yellow are the ones where there are differences. There is a distribution of diagnosis report. If you use in your study info screen, if your lab is using on the last page, the main diagnosis, if you are using these and you're specifying one of these codes, when you generate a distribution of diagnosis report, it will look at those fields for all of your studies. To generate that report, you can just go up to Tools, Distribution of Diagnosis. If you want to perform that on all the studies or just the selected studies. And you can even specify whether or not to include the codes from ICD-9, ICSD, or ICSD-2. Just going to click all of them. This report you cannot customize. It is just a standard report that lists all of the diagnosis codes. It identifies how many studies had that particular diagnosis and what percentage they represented of the overall database. With respect to the database, you know that you can query your database and provide yourself a little subset of records. So there's a sample query here called diagnostic studies. Show me all the diagnostic studies. If you want, you can get more elaborate and say, show me all of the diagnostic studies that we've had in the last month, in the last 2 months, in the last year. Or if you want, you can just say, you know what, just show me all the studies and go up to Tools and select the Export to Excel option. You want to dump all the studies? Yes. And what that will do, it'll just take all of the studies, all of the fields in your window, and open up a new Excel file and dump everything into Excel. So if you feel more comfortable manipulating and querying data in Excel, you can do so, and you can create your own report from your database window using Excel. If you don't have Excel installed on your computer and you select the Export to Excel option, it'll still perform the export. However, it'll dump everything into a text file. You can save your text file, save it as a CSV file, and then take it to a machine that does have Excel, for example, or it doesn't have to be Excel. It can be any machine with a spreadsheet or a database program, such as Microsoft Access, and you can import the text file, and you can manipulate the data that way. Finally, on the Natus website, under the Education Support section, if you click on the Customer Support link, and within that page you'll see a link to download user manuals, and you'll find a manual for the Sleep Report manual, as well as a few other manuals. If you're looking for the comparison scoring document, I urge you can either contact myself or you can contact the technical support department. We are at the end. I'm just going to check my chat column just to see what the questions are. So if you just give me, if you have any questions, by all means, please type them in. All right. So the question is in regards to how up to date the information is when you run the report, and just think back to when I was talking about the study information form. If I generate a report right now with my study open on this particular study, as long as the file is saved, so it's grayed out, which means the autosave is already kicked in, it's already saved. As long as it's saved, if I generate a report right now, the report will be up to date as far as events and staging are concerned. What will likely not be up to date is any information that you input in the study information form, okay, such as this area here, or in the comment section, or the medications, or your custom section. In order for this information to make its way back into your report, you do need to close the study. You don't have to exit the program, just close the study. Because when you close the study, the information in the study info box makes its way back to the database where it's stored, and when the reports are generated, it does a combination of looking at retrieving data from the actual database, and then it also merges that together with the values that are calculated from the actual study itself. Are all reports only on the local computer? We are using a server. All right, so it's a good question. Are all the reports only on the local computer? When you see user templates, I'm just going to share the desktop. Tool options, report templates. All right, anything that's stored in user templates is stored on the local computer. Anything that is stored in the common reports template is stored in the location that is specified up here. Okay? Now, whether or not these reports make their way to the other computers, that depends on how those computers were configured. All right? One thing that the SleepWorks system offers is there's another program that we call Machine Manager that manages the synchronization of certain settings across all machines. And a very quick way to describe this is if you establish your server as the central settings depot, then you would have all of your client machines pointing to the server to retrieve the latest information with respect to reports and other settings as well. So if you have a server, I'm willing to bet quite high that the installation, if it was done with an Excel Tech or Natus person, that it was probably done where they specified or designated your server and made that the central settings depot, and then had all the client machines pointing to that server. Quickly, at the Natus website, if you go to Education, if you go to Customer Support Orders, and you go Excel Tech customers wishing to access downloadable user manuals, please click here. So if you click here, this is where you get all your user manuals. Okay? To go to the neurology e-seminars, you go to Clinical Education Neurology Seminars and download a copy of the e-seminars by clicking on it or right-clicking and saying Save Link As. Okay? I want to thank you for your patience, for your time, and I look forward to seeing you again in future e-seminars or possibly at